Hello folks, it's that Tassie Wargamer here. Darren and John we're about to kick off on a game of sharp practice set in the French-Indian War. Scenario, a couple of interesting things today. So the scenario is one of our own. Basically, we've got two roads set. It's a broken, so it's woodland throughout with just a bridge crossing the river here, and just one house. There's a bit of somebody sort of guarding the path, I guess, or a way house. At that point, we did not know who was going to be doing what. Then we set up 6 points here. So the scenario would be that one of the units would have to get from one end of the table. One of the armies would have to get from one end of the table to the other, using either of those roads. Which of the roads was up to the defender, who's going to be the troop moving along. The other side there are 6 markers here, but he can only deploy from 2 of them, and he must nominate ahead who was going to, which of his units are deploying from which points, and he can only deploy from 2 points. So John's not in the room at the moment, so I'm deploying some of my force from 2 and 3, obviously, because I think I've got the bridge there. John has already decided, he's already advised that he had to pick which end of the table, and I don't know which of these 2 points he's coming in on. We've got the river, which is a wide obstacle, with some marshlands, which is heavy going. The whole rest, apart from the roads, the rest of it is woodland. And that's it, and we've got the bear. So we also rolled to see where the bear was coming on. Now I did that because if it came on one of my positions, we determined that I would re-roll. I didn't have to, so the bear is actually here. John's already determined where he's coming in from, so if he's coming in from 1, he could have a bit of problems with that bear straight up. Now, we are using sharp practice. However, we've decided to go with the leadership roles. So it's a little bit of a bastardised game. We're using men who would be kings. So the leadership, what we've decided is when we draw our chips out, most of our actions are going to be just as normal. If we're moving, firing, and the like, there is no leadership tests. However, we are going to do leadership tests on certain things, such as crossing the river. If John has any, or if we have any regulars, I don't have regulars, but if we have regulars and you want them to get into formation, you have to test on the leadership. If he wanted to present, he has to test on the leadership. And if you want to enter into close combat, into fisticuffs, you would have to test on the leadership. So we've been through the page on, I'm just going to pop over to here. We've been through the page on men who would be kings, and we've allocated traits, values and traits to each of our officers. So we have to roll. Unfortunately, one of my Indians, their leader, has to get a 9 on 2d6 to be able to do any of those things. So it'll be interesting to see. Really handy. I think, I don't know, we found, looking at sharp practice, that it was took a little bit longer to get those leadership values, and I don't know, they didn't really have as much influence on the game. So I think these ones definitely have more of an influence. They can really make or break a game and tell a story. So we haven't got our troops out yet. As they come onto the table, we will introduce them. I've gone for a skirmish force of Marines, Milice Canadiens, some settlers, and 2 groups of Indians. So we'll let you know as the game progresses. So some of the plans have now been released. It's obvious, well, as you can see, that John's group are on road 1. He's now managed to get 3 of his units onto the table. He's just about to deploy another one. So he has got a tribe of Indians, a unit of Highland skirmishers, John.
Yeah.
And some
Grenadiers.
No, and the other guys, Rangers.
Oh, they're Highland skirmishers.
Oh, they're Highland skirmishers. These are
Grenadiers.
Oh, sorry, they're Grenadiers, not Highlanders.
And then I've got a group of Highlanders which are just coming on.
And then a group of Highlanders coming on too. So, and in response to that, I used my 4 flags because all of my chips came out, but I didn't want to use them until I knew where John would be out. Then I've used my 4 flags, so I have brought on both groups of Indians, so 2 groups of Indians plus their leader, now knowing that they're going to have to get across the river if they're going to make any sort of have any impact.
Fire it then?
It's within 6 inches,
no,
we said, for this
okay.
woodland, so no.
Okay, he's going to move.
So while John's making his decisions, just a quick update. As you know, John entered from that area over here. He tried entering, he had his rangers over here in this area here. I just wanted my unit of Marines to move around. However, unfortunately, they rolled so much they actually entered into fisticuffs. I had to roll that officer's leadership, and sure enough, they did into fisticuffs, and they beat that unit. Unfortunately, I was on the flank of John's guys here, this unit here. They entered into fisticuffs with me. I beat them too, and they got pushed back. So they're forming a little pocket here. I've still got my Marine units here and here. My Indians are facing off against John's single unit of Indians here. And I still have my Milice Canadienne and my settlers, which aren't going to do much, but they could just harass. The bear has had no impact yet. However, if it comes up and he gets that target that we use with a high number, he could end up entering into fisticuffs with one of John's units here.
Right.
So this is the table as we speak. We've been through about 5 turns. John's Indians that had crossed the river chose to charge my unit that were in this vicinity. Actually, I think originally you would have seen them up here. My unit came around to skirt, and I sent the others around the back of the building. John chose to enter into fisticuffs, did a lot of damage. He rolled a lot of 6s and 5s, and my unit was sent with a lot of shock running off. We realised after that John, because we've been using that the additional characters thing from the rules from the other book, they were actually cowardly, or the leader was cowardly, so they weren't meant to, but that's okay. We played as if they suddenly had a bout of courage. They're not going to be able to do it again, and these guys hopefully now are going to be able to put a little bit of damage on John's own unit on this flank. The bear was right next to John's unit over here and had a great opportunity to attack. He finally rolled, but he got to go the opposite way. I've got a unit intact here. The unit that had the officer has luckily survived. They had skirted around over to here, entered into fisticuffs with John's unit. 2 of John's unit entered into fisticuffs. They end up both getting thrown back. And now they took some fire from John's unit here, but luckily they have now managed to run back, and they're about to tuck in behind this unit here. So I still have my settlers and my Milice Canadienne off the table. I'm currently on 7 force morale, John's on 8. So I've got a good reserve. I've always tried to keep something in reserve. They're not particularly strong, but they could be just enough to inflict damage on to some of John's forces if they have a lot of shock or casualties. Still on the balance. I'm holding on quite well. Eventually I'm going to have to bring some reserves on. If I can wipe out John's Indians, I can get this Indian group, if there is an intact, over the bridge, and it could be decisive. The game's been progressing, but unlike usual, there's still no decision yet. John has thrown back my Marines, who end up having to form into one group. He marched over the bridge crossing. I've managed to ambuscade with 1 unit and their officer to put a bit of fire. Unfortunately, he couldn't go into fisticuffs because that officer is yellow bellied, so he simply cannot enter into fisticuffs. Put a bit of fire, no great effect. My Indians still haven't managed to cross the river. So it's still on the balance, but in the end, if we look at simply holding the crossing instead of getting John's troops off the table, well, John had to get his troops off the table to reinforce Fort William Henry, and so maybe we've delayed them long enough. Who knows? It's been a great game. Good turn of events late in the game. This group of my Marines that have been holding on tight put some fire onto John's Grenadiers here. 2 dead, John?
3 dead.
3 dead. One of them was his officer, and that officer
Oh,
was...
no, 1 dead and 3 shocked. Right.
1 dead, 3 shock.
Yeah.
John rolled a 1, which was his officer, and yeah, that 1 meant he was dead. So he's lost his ranking officer. He rolled, and he's lost 2 not chain of command, force morale. So it's still in the balance. Late game. This last turn has really taken a turn for the worst for the British. I ended up bringing on my other 2 units.
They were hiding.
They were hiding up in the trees. One of them, these settlers, managed to put some fire into the back of these guys, doubling their shock. My Malise Canadians here put a lot of fire into these guys, this unit of Highlanders, doubling their shock, killing. No, their officer who was already downgraded to a 1 was wounded again. With that amount of shock, they are now retreating over the bridge. John now has no leader with this group, a leader with 0 orders in this group. 0 orders in this group. The leader over here has got orders, but he's a coward, so he cannot enter into fisticuffs. Or he can't. He's got to keep outside of 6 inches. And the only one that's doing anything that can do anything is the Indian. He's a coward too, so he can't. He's got to stay outside of. And we decided that figure would be 6 because normally it talks about movement range. We've decided that if you have a coward, they got to stick outside of 6 inches of here. Not looking good for the British at this point. We'll let you know how it finishes up. And John has just thrown in the towel, deciding that his forces were becoming ineffective, I think. We've had a gentleman's handshake. We've just been having a quick, brief discussion. Both probably agreed that the Canadian, my Company de la Marine, that unit that went round the back and almost accidentally entered into fisticuffs, taking on 2 units and driving them both backwards, then wounding an officer, really delayed John's movement. It took him a lot longer than what he wanted to get to even just the bridge. By that time, he'd had a couple of units that really couldn't do much, and then it allowed me to bring on those reserves, which I had to really, it was looking as if I could lose the game, but I brought the reserves on at the right time after John's guys had passed and managed to put a lot of fire. John's Indians over here did really well. I had 2 groups of Indians here to take on his 1. He obliterated 1 early and then managed to, I thought I'd be able to get across the river. I put a fair bit of shock in them when they were there. Thought with their shock I'd then be able to escape them and get across the river, but they rallied really well and ended up putting enough fire into me that prevented me from getting across the river to put assistance, but it didn't matter in the end. And in the end, the British had to get off the table to relieve the fort, and the French just had to delay them, and it certainly was. The British aren't going to be in any shape to provide any sort of assistance to the fort down the river. It was a great game. John and I generally often will come up with their own scenarios. We never let rules come in the way, so if we're not sure, we just say let's roll for it, and that way the game rolls really well. Very enjoyable game, good bit of fun, a lot of laughter, a lot of bad dice rolls. Anyway, thanks for watching. Maybe nothing next week, maybe the week after. I think we might be going into some 20 mil World War II. We'll see how it goes. All the best. Thank you.